Hi everybody, welcome to another Literacy Teachers YouTube video where we're all about helping you to inspire, motivate, and change how your students read and write for academic success. Now in this video, I want to talk to you a little bit more about students' reading identities. We've had some previous videos on this topic. It's actually a very important topic that you may just not have that much information about because it's not one that gets a lot of press. But what I want to do today is talk to you about when students' reading identities don't align with your own interpretation or even the existing data that you have on them. So real quick, just remember, reading identities is about how students self-identify as a reader. So very basic. They might say, I'm an excellent, I'm an average, I'm a poor reader. They might say, I can't read well, right? It's all about how they understand themselves as readers. Now, usually, for students, right, the way that you see them and the way that they see themselves and the way that the data describes them, those three things tend to come together. But sometimes we've got outliers, okay? Sometimes students don't see themselves as readers the way you do or that the way that the data describes them. So what do I mean by this, okay? And this can go any number of ways that you can think of, but I'm going to give you what I think is a really interesting example that we're going to be sort of having some spin-off videos to go into some of these topics in a little bit more detail. So consider this student, all right? And this is a real student, okay? 8th grader. His reading abilities tested on a college level, okay? So when I gave this class a reading assessment, like he tested so high it wasn't even on the charts anymore, okay? This kid was really, really smart, all right? When I met him, he was reading 1984 for the second time, and he could discuss it with you at length, including telling you why he was reading it again and what he hoped to get out of it. He was also, in 7th grade, the district level spelling bee champion. So how would you, right, if somebody said, well, so how would you describe this kid as a reader? You would probably, in addition to the things I just said there, right, you would probably describe him pretty favorably, very positively, right? Do you know how he described himself, though? He thought he was a terrible reader. Why? Because what he told me when I asked him why he would say that about himself was because he told me that as he was reading, he would stop to think about the ideas that he was presented with. And of course, right, that's not the sign of someone who has reading difficulties, right? It's not the sign of a terrible reader. It's what we want students to do. But he argued that thinking about those ideas slowed him down, and it caused him to finish assignments at a much slower rate than his peers. Now, you might be thinking, oh my gosh, who cares, right? But somewhere along the way, he got this idea that being a good reader was about saying words quickly and correctly. And I will tell you that this is actually a really widespread belief amongst kids these days. That's what they tend to think a good reader is someone who can say words really fast. Making meaning, as he understood it, that wasn't what was emphasized. Making meaning didn't come into his definition of being a good reader, right? Speed and word recognition was what he thought made someone a good reader. Now you and I, right, we're gonna disagree with this. Obviously, right, you have to be reading at a good rate and you have to have good word recognition or you can't have comprehension. Obviously, those are components of being a good reader, but those aren't the only two things, right, in and of itself, because if you're not engaging with the text and making meaning and thinking about the ideas, which he was also doing, then that's not going to get you anywhere if you can just say the words, but you don't know what you're saying, or you don't take time to think about what you're saying, okay? But this was the definition that he had crafted for himself, and that's important to understand here, is that students have these definitions. They are never going to align with, most likely, with your definition or the research or anything like that, but there they are, okay? So why does this matter? Because obviously he could read really well. He could comprehend what his teacher gave him. He had really good grades. So how much do we really need to care about the fact that he thought speed and recognition, word recognition, were the only important things? Well, I'm going to say it actually is really important that we care, even though he was going to do well no matter what, right? Despite his definition, despite his identity as being a poor reader. And I'm going to tell you, it matters because how students identify as readers, right? Good, bad, etc. It influences how they participate in class. And this can actually be both a positive and a negative thing. And but what I want you to take from this video is just that one point. How students identify as readers influences how they participate in class as it relates to reading-based assignments, okay? Now, in subsequent videos, I'm going to be discussing how it influences them. I'm going to be talking about what gets into their brains. What do I personally think is causing them to have these really severely limited definitions of what it means to read? And I'm going to talk to you what you can do about it. So make sure you stay tuned.